I never thought a secondhand couch would be the thing to tear apart friendships I've cherished for years. The worn cushions that have supported countless team celebrations now feel tainted with resentment and betrayal. Every time I sink into it, I'm reminded of the messages that made my stomach drop and the team divide that followed. This isn't just about furniture, it's about trust, expectations, and what it means to carry on traditions we thought were sacred. When I first made the university team, it felt like I'd been inducted into more than just a sports club. It was a family with its own customs and traditions. Among these was the coveted team apartment, passed down through generations of athletes. Current teammates would live there, and when they graduated, they'd pass their rooms to incoming teammates. It wasn't just convenient, it was a legacy, a physical manifestation of our team's bonds that transcended the changing roster. I remember the day I found out a spot would be opening up for me. The excitement bubbling in my chest made it hard to focus on anything else. My friend, let's call her my teammate, got the news at the same time, and we spent hours imagining what it would be like to actually live in the team apartment. The place where team legends had lived, where countless victory celebrations had occurred, where the real bonds of teamwork were forged beyond practice hours. The two graduating seniors who were moving out reached out about selling us their furniture. It seemed like a perfect arrangement. They wouldn't have to haul beds and desks across the country, and we wouldn't have to shop for basics. The prices they quoted seemed fair, and we happily transferred the money, grateful for one less hassle in the transition. Moving day came with all the chaotic energy you'd expect, boxes everywhere, suitcases stuffed with clothes, and the peculiar mix of anxiety and excitement that comes with any major life change. The departing seniors had already moved out weeks before, leaving behind clean rooms with the furniture we'd purchased. I remember standing in the doorway of what was now my room, feeling a profound sense of belonging. This wasn't just any college housing. This was a place with history, with meaning. The common areas were already furnished. A television stand from who knows when, a bookshelf that had probably seen a decade of textbooks come and go, and of course, the team couch. That couch, with its slightly faded fabric and cushions that remembered the shape of athletes past, was the centerpiece of the living room. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, or so I thought. The first few weeks in the apartment felt magical. My teammate and I settled into a comfortable routine, decorating our personal spaces while respecting the communal vibe of the shared areas. The other teammates already living there welcomed us warmly, showing us the quirks of the old building, which shower had the best water pressure, which cabinet hinges needed special coaxing, and which window to keep cracked for optimal airflow. We hosted our first team gathering just days after moving in. Everyone piled onto the couch and floor, passing around takeout containers and laughing about preseason training mishaps. I remember looking around and feeling an overwhelming sense of rightness. This was exactly where I was meant to be. The apartment came with its share of hand-me-downs beyond just the furniture. There were unspoken house rules passed through generations. Always replace the toilet paper if you use the last of it, never leave dishes in the sink overnight, and most importantly, respect each other's study time during finals week. The system worked because everyone bought into the culture of respect and shared responsibility. I found little treasures left behind by previous tenants. A motivational quote taped inside a cabinet door, team photos from years past tucked into the edges of the hallway mirror, and a collection of takeout menus from places that had long since closed. These weren't forgotten items. They were deliberate legacies, little pieces of team history, intentionally preserved. The couch quickly became my favorite spot. After grueling practices, I'd collapse there with an ice pack and protein shake, letting my muscles recover while scrolling through social media or catching up on lectures I'd missed. Late at night, when sleep evaded me before big competitions, I'd curl up under a throw blanket and watch mindless television until my eyes grew heavy. That couch knew my vulnerabilities, my anxieties, and my small triumphs in a way that made it feel almost sentient. Never once during those blissful first weeks did I question who technically owned the things around me. The apartment had a communal spirit. What belonged to one teammate belonged to all, within reason. Or at least, that's what I believed. The bubble burst 3 weeks after moving. University classes had just begun, bringing with them the familiar rhythm of lectures, assignments, and team practices squeezed in between. I was just settling into this new routine when my phone buzzed with a message that would upend everything. One of the graduated seniors, the one with the perpetual smile who'd hugged me goodbye with genuine warmth, had sent a group message to all current apartment residents. She was requesting payment for the couch and various other items left in the common areas. a collection of kitchen knives with dulled blades, a plastic kettle that had seen better days, even bottles of half-used body wash forgotten in the shower cabinet. The total came to $1,500, an amount that made my eyes widen and my breath catch. I read the message 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding something. This couldn't be right. We'd already paid for the items we'd agreed to purchase, the bed frames, mattresses, and desks in our individual rooms. These common area items had never been mentioned during those transactions. More importantly, they had been in the apartment for years, passed down from team to team, their original owners long graduated and gone. I immediately called my teammate who had moved in with me. Her reaction mirrored my own. Confusion followed quickly by indignation. We compared notes, confirming that neither of us had ever been approached about buying these items. The timing felt calculated, waiting until they were hundreds of miles away, until we were fully settled, until removing these items would cause maximum disruption. The apartment suddenly felt different, as if the walls themselves were listening to our increasingly heated conversation. The couch that had been a source of comfort now felt like a trap, its presence a constant reminder of the unexpected demand hanging over our heads. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction I'd had with the graduated seniors, searching for hints I might have missed. Had they mentioned selling these items and I'd somehow forgotten? Had there been an implicit understanding that I'd failed to grasp? The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that this was unprecedented, a break from the tradition that had governed the team apartment for years. What began as confusion quickly evolved into something more complex and painful. I reached out to other teammates not living in the apartment, seeking clarity on the unwritten rules of furniture inheritance. The responses I received revealed a team suddenly, unexpectedly divided. Some were firmly on our side, outraged at what they saw as an opportunistic money grab. That's not how it works, they insisted. When you leave things behind, they become part of the apartment legacy. Others took a more measured approach. Well, technically, it is their property, so they have the right to sell it. A few even sided completely with the graduated seniors, suggesting we were entitled for expecting free furniture. The issue quickly transcended the actual items in question. This was now about principles, about expectations, about what it meant to be part of this team family we'd all bought into. Each time another teammate weighed in, the divide grew deeper, the possibility of resolution more remote. Team practices became tense affairs. People who had previously been inseparable now avoided each other, their loyalties declared by whom they sat with during water breaks. Our coach noticed the shift in dynamic, but remained unaware of its cause. "Whatever's going on, leave it at the door," she warned as performances began to suffer. But how could we leave it at the door when the issue literally waited for us at home? The graduated seniors dug in their heels, insisting they had always intended to sell these items, but had been too busy with moving to mention it earlier. This explanation rang hollow. They had found time to negotiate the sale of other furniture pieces with us after all. When pressed about why previous residents hadn't been charged for these same items, they deflected, saying that was different without elaborating how. My teammate and I found ourselves in an impossible position. Paying the requested amount felt like submitting to extortion, especially for items that were clearly at the end of their usable life. The couch that had seemed quaintly worn now revealed itself as genuinely old, with springs that occasionally poked through the fabric and mysterious stains that predated any current team member's tenure. The kitchen knives were so dull they were barely functional. The plastic kettle had mineral buildup, so severe it affected the taste of the water. Yet refusing to pay meant potentially losing these items altogether. The graduated seniors threatened to arrange for friends to come collect everything if payment wasn't received. The thought of strangers entering our home, dismantling our living space while we watched helplessly, made my skin crawl. Equally unappealing was the prospect of having to remove these bulky items ourselves, finding a way to dispose of them, and then scraping together money we didn't have to replace them. As the standoff continued, I found myself interrogating the entire concept of the team apartment. What had seemed like a beautiful tradition, a physical space where team culture lived and breathed, now felt like a burden, laden with unspoken expectations and potential landmines. I spoke with an alumna who had lived in the apartment nearly a decade ago, curious if similar situations had arisen in the past. Her laughter on the phone told me everything before she even spoke. "That couch was ancient even when I lived there," she said. "Nobody ever paid for that stuff. It just stayed with the apartment." That was the point. Her confirmation should have been validating, but instead, it deepened my sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about money. It was about a wholesale rejection of the values and traditions that made our team special. The graduated seniors weren't just asking for payment. They were effectively saying that the community spirit, the intergenerational bond we all treasured, had limits. It could be quantified, priced, and invoiced. I began noticing other cracks in the foundation of our team culture. The inclusive spirit that had initially drawn me to this group seemed conditional, dependent on unspoken hierarchies and expectations. Senior members expected deference from freshmen. In-state students sometimes formed cliques that excluded those from farther away. Small conflicts that would have seemed insignificant before now appeared as symptoms of deeper dysfunction. The couch became a symbol in my mind, not of comfort or community, but of disillusionment. Each time I sat on it, I felt the weight of this conflict, this fundamental misalignment of values. I found myself avoiding the common areas altogether, retreating to my room where at least I knew where I stood with my possessions. My teammate did the same, and soon the apartment that had felt so vibrant and alive became eerily quiet, its common spaces abandoned like neutral territory in a Cold War. Other teammates living in the apartment tried to mediate, suggesting compromises. Maybe we could pay a nominal amount as a goodwill gesture while making it clear this wasn't setting a precedent for future residents. Perhaps we could start an apartment fund where each new resident contributed a small amount toward maintenance and eventual replacement of common items. But these solutions addressed the symptom, not the disease. The fundamental question remained: were we a community that shared freely, understanding that what goes around comes around? Or were we just a collection of individuals, each looking out for our own interests and financial bottom lines? As days stretched into weeks with no resolution, my resentment calcified into something harder and more bitter. I found myself avoiding team social events, making excuses about schoolwork or fatigue. The truth was, I couldn't bear to make small talk with people who had taken sides against us in what felt like an existential conflict. Nighttime became the worst. Lying awake, I'd run endless mental calculations, not just financial ones, though those were pressing enough for a student on scholarship. I calculated the cost of standing my ground versus the cost of capitulating. I weighed the value of team harmony against the value of personal principles. I tried to project forward, imagining how this conflict might affect team dynamics during crucial competitions later in the season. My academic performance began to suffer. I'd sit in lectures physically present but mentally back in the apartment, rehearsing arguments or imagining confrontations. I'd open textbooks only to find myself staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes, absorbing nothing. My training suffered too. Coaches noticed my distraction, my lack of focus. "Where's your head at?" became a common refrain, one I could never honestly answer. Most painful was the way this conflict had changed my relationship with the sport itself. What had been a source of pure joy, of exhilaration and accomplishment, now came with baggage. Each time I put on the team uniform, I felt the weight of these fractured relationships. The camaraderie that had made grueling practices bearable was diminished, replaced by an undercurrent of tension that everyone felt but few acknowledged directly. I found myself questioning whether I even belonged on this team anymore. Maybe I had misunderstood the culture from the beginning. Maybe what I had interpreted as genuine community was just convenience masquerading as connection. These thoughts spiraled darkly, especially late at night when the apartment creaked with settling noises that sounded like accusations. My parents noticed the change in me during our weekly video chats. "You seem stressed," my mother observed, her forehead creasing with concern. I gave vague answers about academic pressure and competition anxiety, unable to articulate the true source of my distress. How could I explain that a secondhand couch had somehow come to represent everything I valued about trust, integrity, and community? Then came the dreams. Vivid, anxiety-laden scenarios, where I'd come home to find the apartment stripped bare, everything taken while I was at practice. Or worse, dreams where team competitions devolved into chaos, because half the team refused to pass to the other half. I'd wake from these sweating, my heart racing, more exhausted than before I'd fallen asleep. The situation finally came to a head during a team bonding event. Ironically, an activity designed to strengthen our connections and build trust. We were engaged in a problem-solving exercise requiring communication and collaboration when someone made a joke about passing things down that was clearly a reference to our conflict. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface suddenly boiled over. What followed was an ugly, raw confrontation that had been weeks in the making. Accusations flew. Old grievances unrelated to the furniture dispute resurfaced. People said things they couldn't take back, revealing resentments that predated my time on the team. I stood in the middle of this emotional battlefield, simultaneously the catalyst and a casualty, watching as something precious deteriorated before my eyes. Our coach, finally understanding the gravity of the situation, called an emergency team meeting the following day. In a voice that left no room for argument, she laid out the facts as she saw them. Our performance was suffering, our reputation within the athletic department was at risk, and most importantly, we were failing each other as teammates. "Whatever this is about," she said, scanning faces that couldn't meet her eyes, "it ends now. You have 48 hours to resolve it, or I start making decisions about who stays on this roster based on who's putting the team first." Her ultimatum hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown down that none of us could ignore. In the silent locker room after she left, the reality of our situation became painfully clear. We had allowed a dispute over material possessions to threaten something far more valuable: our collective identity as a team, our shared purpose, our mutual support system. That night, I sat alone on the contested couch, running my hand over its worn fabric. In the quiet apartment, with most residents having gone home for the weekend, I had space to really think about what mattered to me. Was I willing to sacrifice my place on this team, a position I had worked years to achieve, over a matter of principle regarding secondhand furniture? Was the righteousness of my indignation worth the relationships being damaged? And yet, surrendering felt like accepting a fundamental injustice, condoning behavior that undermined the very values this team claimed to uphold. If I paid for items that countless others had received freely as part of the team's tradition, wasn't I enabling the commodification of something that should remain priceless? I texted my teammate, asking her to come to the living room. When she arrived, eyes tired from the same sleepless nights that had plagued me, we sat together on the couch that had become both battleground and hostage. Without speaking, we both knew we had reached a crossroads. The solution, when it finally emerged, wasn't perfect. Few resolutions to complex emotional conflicts ever are. But it was something we could all live with, a compromise that acknowledged both practical realities and deeper principles. After hours of conversation, first just between my teammate and me, then expanding to include other apartment residents, then finally the broader team, we crafted a proposal. We would pay a significantly reduced amount for the items left behind, acknowledging their depreciated condition and the unconventional timing of the request. This payment would be framed explicitly as a one-time exception, not a precedent for future apartment transitions. More importantly, we would create a formal team apartment charter, a written document outlining expectations, responsibilities, and procedures for future transitions. No more unspoken rules or assumptions. No more vulnerability to selective memory or reinterpretation of traditions. Everything would be clear, transparent, and agreed upon by all parties. The graduated seniors initially pushed back against the reduced payment, but when faced with the unified position of current team members and the practical reality that they had no easy way to reclaim the items from hundreds of miles away, they reluctantly agreed. I suspect they also recognized how damaging their insistence had been to relationships they once valued. The payment was made. The couch remained. Life in the apartment gradually returned to something resembling normalcy, though with a new undercurrent of awareness that hadn't existed before. We were more careful with each other now, more deliberate in our communications, more conscious of expectations and assumptions. The team performance improved as the tension dissipated, though certain friendships never fully recovered. Some bonds, once broken, leave permanent fault lines, invisible until pressure is applied, then suddenly, glaringly obvious. Months have passed since what we now somewhat ruefully call the Great Couch Controversy. The emotional intensity has faded, replaced by a more measured understanding of what happened and why. I've had time to reflect on what this experience taught me about community, about expectations, about the complex intersection of material possessions and interpersonal relationships. I've learned that the most damaging conflicts often arise not from malice but from misalignment, people operating under different assumptions, different values, different understandings of how things work. What seemed obviously wrong to me seemed perfectly reasonable to others, and reconciling those perspectives required more empathy than I initially had available. I've learned that traditions, however beautiful, are fragile things. They require active maintenance, clear communication, and occasional reassessment. What works for one generation may not translate perfectly to the next, and assuming continuity without confirmation is a recipe for disappointment. Most importantly, I've learned something about myself, About my capacity for righteous anger, yes, but also about my ability to find common ground when it matters most. I discovered where my line in the sand truly lies, and it's not where I thought it was. Material possessions, even those imbued with symbolic meaning, matter far less to me than the relationships they're meant to serve. The team apartment continues its function as our shared home. New memories accumulate, layering over the difficult ones like fresh paint, covering old marks on the wall. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still feel echoes of that conflict. A momentary hesitation before using something in a common area. A flicker of uncertainty about boundaries and expectations. But these are growing fainter with time. The couch remains the centerpiece of our living room, still worn, still faded, still bearing the imprint of athletes past and present. I no longer see it as a symbol of conflict, but as a reminder of resilience, of a community that faced a threat to its cohesion and emerged, if not stronger, then at least more self-aware. When I graduate next year, I will leave behind my bed and desk for the next teammate to move in. I will leave clearly, explicitly, with transparent communication about what I'm giving freely, and what I might wish to sell. But more importantly, I'll leave behind this story, not as a grievance to be nursed, but as a lesson in how easily misunderstanding can threaten even the strongest bonds, and how the things we own matter infinitely less than the connections we build. And when I visit years from now, if that old couch is still there, sagging in the middle, threadbare at the arms, I'll sit on it with a different kind of appreciation. Not just for the comfort it provides, but for the uncomfortable growth it inspired, the hard lessons it taught me about what truly matters when building a home and a team that can withstand the inevitable conflicts of shared life. Because in the end, that's what the team apartment is supposed to be. Not just housing, not just convenience, but a physical manifestation of our commitment to each other. A place where the boundaries between mine and yours blur into ours. Where what we share isn't just space but purpose, not just possessions but belonging.